Hello, everyone. Welcome and thanks for joining us. I need to do a little bit of housekeeping just to let you all know, for everyone who registered, you will receive an email next week with a link to a captioned recording of this webinar. So keep an eye on your inboxes for that. And then at the end of this webinar, we're going to have a Q&A. So if you've got any questions, pop them in the Q&A section. Should be at the bottom of your screen somewhere. Try and keep them out of the chat. We will try and keep an eye on them, but anything pertinent, pop it in the Q&A. And then, yeah, I am joined today by Kyle Mathews, hello, Gatsby founder and CTO, and Jay Callicott, head of engineering at Media Current, sorry. And I'm Paul, developer relations at Gatsby. And so if you're all ready, I think, Kyle, I shall hand over to you.
Awesome. So a little introduction to myself. I started Gatsby back in 2015, which makes it ancient, I guess, in the JavaScript world. I mean, programming, something I like programming, do a lot of reading, travel when there's not worldwide pandemics or something, blocking that. And then, yeah, family and friends. Pretty simple life, but it's a good one. Yeah, and I like things to go fast, really, really fast.
Good intro. Hey, everybody. My name is Jay Callicott. I've been working with Drupal for a long time, about 15 years or so. Passionate about open source, and I'm also, of course, a fan of Gatsby. And so I've been working with Kyle and the Gatsby team on the Drupal Gatsby integration. And we're hoping that with the work that we've done in this presentation and all the new documentation that it's going to be a lot easier for people to get up and running. And then, so quickly, I'll just give you a little bit of info about Media Current. We're an open source product agency, been involved, heavily involved with open source. Drupal is our core technology, but of course, we've been doing more decoupled work more recently. We love Gatsby, kind of loved it from the beginning, and we work with all verticals, global team. And yeah, so excited to be talking with you all today. And Kyle, did you want to give a rundown of Gatsby Inc.?
Yeah. So Gatsby, of course, is both a framework, but also a company. And we started the company in order to, really ensure that Gatsby could be kind of everything that we dreamed and hoped it could be, and provide really essential kind of cloud services around Gatsby. And so there's some like really exciting things that we've done in the last couple of years, with Gatsby Cloud hosting, and also going to be introducing some other improvements that we've been making lately in just a bit.
All right, and yeah, why don't you go ahead and jump in?
Yeah. So first, yeah. So this, basically, the main topic of this webinar is Drupal, and Jay's going to be walking through it. But I want to kind of reintroduce, in a way, what Gatsby is. And what we're calling it now is a reactive site generator. So next slide. A little JC meme. So we launched Gatsby 1.0 2017, and we've been doubling down ever since on its really novel and powerful features, which are a data layer and reactive builds. Next slide. And last year we launched Gatsby Cloud hosting, and since then we've been pushing more and more of the sort of like the ideas behind this architecture onto our cloud infrastructure. And today, as I'll show in a bit, we have some like benchmarks showing that there's really no faster or simpler way to publish content to the web than Gatsby Cloud. And so we call this like reactive site generation. So these two kind of like core bits of Gatsby, the data layer and reactive build. So the data layer is, you've heard of like, you probably heard like, the source plugins and so forth. And the whole idea of this part of the architecture is that it syncs data from any different, data source, whether it's like Contentful, WordPress, Shopify, Drupal, etc., into the Gatsby DB. And it does it in a way that's like, it's real-time syncing. It's not sort of like a one-time thing, but we can do like sort of like very fast incremental fetches of stuff. And this gives you Gatsby and your site, it sort of gives you access to a real-time stream of data changes, which is like very, very powerful. And so that real-time stream we combined with GraphQL, because what GraphQL gives you is a page can like declare its data dependencies. So it can say, I want this page to have this data. And so then whenever data changes, the framework in Gatsby Cloud makes sure that the page is updated to the latest thing. And this can be very, very fast. Next slide. So yeah, so we'll see a little demo of exactly how fast it's gotten.
You want me to play this?
Yeah. It's like 15 seconds. So you want to full screen it too. It's kind of small. So yeah, so this is me with Contentful, just like make some changes, publishing it and refreshing. So it's like almost instantaneous. And while this is Contentful, it's the same thing with Drupal and WordPress and a bunch of other integrations. And so that's the kind of speed that we've gotten, like literally sub-second, like click publish, boom, it's live. Okay, next slide.
Yeah,
I was just playing.
Okay.
So this whole idea of like reactivity, you might have run across it in other programming domains. And the basic idea is, how do we account for data changing? So if A, depends on B and C, and then B changes, how do we make sure A is updated to sort of the latest, what it should be, sort of recompute, A. And so React is an excellent example, because like React, you say with JSX, you're not writing HTML, but you're sort of saying to React, this is what I want the DOM to be, and you kind of combine it with the data. And then React then takes care of saying, okay, this is what the DOM is now, and then your data changed or your code changed or something, and now we make the DOM look like this. And that's sort of like going from what you say you want to then what it is really powerful, and is a great example of sort of reactivity, where you're like, the framework takes care of the messy bits of making sure all the outputs are updated when one of the inputs change. Okay, next slide. Yeah, so this is like a really hard problem to solve, but it's extremely nice to use for people, because it takes care of a lot of like complicated bits that you have to do. So yeah, so this idea of reactivity can be applied to any sort of inputs, outputs. And yeah, so back to sort of this idea of reactive site generation. This is what Gatsby Cloud is doing for your site CDN cache. Like everyone knows CDNs are amazing. They make your site a lot faster. Every page should be served from the CDN. So it's like super scalable, super fast. But it's actually quite tricky to make sure that, the CDN is always up to date with the latest changes. And so because reactivity and sort of real-time data changes, the real-time data stream is baked into Gatsby from the get-go, as we saw with the Contentful demo, it's all almost instantaneous updating from the cache. You change something somewhere and it's going to get updated immediately. Okay, next slide. So same sort of like, the cache on the CDN is the output, your code and your data and your site are the inputs. One of those changes, we update the cache. So a lot of people are like, okay, aren't you a static site generator? Like, aren't static site generators slow? We don't use static site generators for like content sites. That doesn't make sense. And we're like, yeah, that's actually true. Like, if you run Gatsby as a static site generator, it's not going to be as fast. And so to show that, I benchmarked using Gatsby, the same Gatsby site on Gatsby Cloud, where it's sort of packaged up as a reactive site generator. It's like to do really fast optimized builds, versus as a static site generator and sort of like a traditional CI/CD tool. Like there's a ton of places that people run Gatsby like this, so like Netlify, Vercel, AWS Amplify, GitHub Page. I mean, there's a million of them, because they're all sort of the same, where they like provision a Linux container, they clone your repo, they install your packages, they run the build process, they deploy it. So there's just a lot of steps, and it's slow, as we'll see in the results. So the next slide. And so the benchmark site is the benchmark is, an e-commerce site where the inventory level keeps changing. You don't want the inventory level to be stale on the site, because then people might like try to buy something that doesn't, isn't in stock anymore. And so the test was very simple. It's like it makes a change, and then it keeps pinging the CDN until the CDN has the inventory level, and then it changes the inventory level again, and then waits until whatever. And then you do that 100 times, and then you'll see kind of like what is the the average time for how long the inventory level is stale on the CDN, because faster is better. You don't want stale information on your site. Yeah, and so this is the same problem as like content workflows, like a content editor changing stuff in Drupal. They don't want to wait around to see a preview. They don't want to wait around when they click publish. They just expect to go live instantly. Faster the better. So yeah, so deploy Netlify. Okay, next slide. And yeah, so these are the difference. Gatsby Cloud. So P50 is like more than 50%. So like 100 builds, like more than 50 builds. Our 50 builds were 1.3 seconds or under. PD99 is like at least 4.1 seconds for like the very slowest one. Anyways, so yeah, so about 100x difference between the median publish time, where Gatsby running on Gatsby Cloud versus sort of as an SSG on the CI/CD tool. And so yeah, so conclusion is like static site generators are great, but they're really just too slow at updating, the CDN to support content workflows, and that's why Gatsby was designed not as an SSG ultimately, but as this reactive site generator where we can update the CDN cache instantly. And yeah, we have a ton of people using Gatsby as their front end for their headless CMS and sort of decoupled setups and having a great experience. So let's jump into how you do that with Drupal.
Awesome. Thank you, Kyle. I'll take it from here. So let's dive into this tutorial. First, I wanted to cover the requirements. We have, several requirements. First, let's look at the Drupal requirements. We're going to use Composer, which is recommended with Drupal. You don't have to use it, but I think it's easier with Composer, and all our documentation is assuming that you will use Composer. You'll need a local environment. I'm using DDEV in my example, but you can, of course, use anything. And then we have just pushed out some more updates to the Gatsby module. It's now on a 2x version. And so I wanted to just pause to cover some of the improvements that we've made. We've been working hard on this. And so it's really kind of a foundational release. The 1x module had been around for a while, since the early days of Gatsby, when it was still pretty new. Gatsby Cloud was pretty new. And so there was a lot of like technical debt things to clean up, and we needed to fix bugs and improve stability and all that kind of stuff. We also tried to improve the UX in terms of like the configuration. And in terms of features that's new in 2x, the main thing is that we have better support for preview. 1x didn't make a distinction between edits that you would want for like a public build versus edits that you would want preview to have access to. And so in the 2x version of the module, we split those logs up, and so that we can serve some data to preview and some data to builds. And in terms of like new features, again, there's not a ton outside of that. We do have like a nice little autosave feature. It works well with content moderation. If you have that turned on, because if you default to draft, then the autosave thing works well, because as soon as you click preview, it'll autosave your page and pretty quickly load in your preview. Now, covering some additional Drupal modules, JSON API is required. Kyle, it might be good if, I know we get this question a lot as far as like why JSON API versus Gatsby module. Maybe you can explain kind of the reasoning behind that.
Yeah, so I think one source of the question is like people are like, oh, Gatsby uses GraphQL, so any integration that you do with any backend has to use GraphQL too. And that part's not true. Like Gatsby uses GraphQL for so there's kind of like two different data transferring points. So one is from the Gatsby DB into your page components, and the other is syncing data from any backend into the Gatsby DB. And so for that the syncing from backend data sources, that can be done however you want. Like Gatsby source file system just reads files off the disk. There's no transfer protocol of any sort, whether HTTP or REST or GraphQL or whatever. So so that part's like the JSON API works great for our purposes of moving data out of Drupal into the Gatsby DB. The second reason is largely just that, the JSON API is, in core, and it's fully supported, and it's always there. You don't have to install something new. Yeah, well, there could be advantages to using the GraphQL. We haven't really seen any disadvantages to using the JSON API, and it's been very stable for a lot of people using it. So that's why we've continued to stick with it.
Yeah, I think that's a good summary. So we do also leverage the API extras module, and I'll show you a little bit of that. So that is a requirement. For today's tutorial, we're going to use keyauth module, and I'll show you how to configure that. That is handy for authenticating the preview server, which needs access to usually unpublished edits and things like that. And you don't have to use it, but it is recommended. Also note, if you use Gatsby Cloud, you're going to need your website available, web accessible somewhere, because Gatsby Cloud does need to fetch content from your site. And so there's a lot of options. You can self-host. Acquia and Pantheon are two of the biggest web hosts. In terms of the Gatsby requirements, it's the usual npm Gatsby. Gatsby source Drupal is the plugin that supports JSON API. So that's kind of the official Drupal plugin. And then Gatsby Cloud is, of course, optional, but as Kyle mentioned, there's a lot of advantages to using Gatsby Cloud. So we will include that in our tutorial. I think I mentioned this earlier, but we spent a lot of time on the documentation for Gatsby to try to make it, again, as easy as possible to get started. So we've got the 2x documentation is a handbook that you can get to from the project page. And we also have this full tutorial that I'm going through today is already up on Drupal.org. You can find that. I'm actually going to be using that as my guide today. So I'll be going through this step by step, and I think that's going to be helpful for you. And then, of course, we've got there's advanced configuration documentation up on the Gatsby website for the source plugin. We're just going to cover the basics today, but there's several different ways to configure that. All right, let's look at what we'll be working with today in the tutorial. So we've got a demo starter. Now, this isn't a starter you would use on like a real project, but it's a great learning tool and a way for you to figure out how to get everything working together and then give you some confidence for applying this to your real project. On the Drupal side, we wanted to, again, make this as easy as possible. So we're going to use a core demo theme. It's called the Umami. You may have heard of it. It's like a fake restaurant site. And what's nice is it creates some structure and some sample content, sample users. And so what we're going to do is our little starter will fetch some article content and render that in a Gatsby application. And then we created a sandbox module. We do have plans to move this as a submodule in the main project, but for now it's a sandbox module, and it also saves some steps. So you don't have to use it. You could do the steps manually using that documentation handbook, but I find that it helps speed things up a little bit. And so we'll cover that. And then I'm also going to show you the composer commands for how to set things up, but we have a composer JSON that's already that's already been updated that you can check and compare it against your own work. And so, yeah, I'm going to show you how to configure everything end to end, and then we'll also show you how to get it working in Gatsby Cloud. All right. So we are ready to dive right in. I also plan to post this video to the tutorial page. It'll be accessible on the same page. So yeah, I'm going to go through all these steps. And the first step is just setting up all the composer stuff. So we will dive right in, and live screen shares are always fun. So the first thing that we're going to do is create our kind of base composer template. I'm just using the recommended kind of official Drupal composer template, just does some boilerplate stuff. we're going to use Drush, which is a command line tool for Drupal. So we're going to want to install that. And then since we are using a sandbox module, we're going to need to update the minimum stability to dev. If you don't use the sandbox module, then you don't need to do that. Oops. Oh, man. Okay, hold on. I did the wrong thing. I've got a CD to my, let's see. And I got to run this command again. So I ran it in the wrong place. All right, let's check. Okay. So let's update composer JSON. And so this is our repo that allows Composer to be aware of where to find the sandbox module. So we need to add that up here underneath repositories. I'm not going to worry about formatting it right now. That should work. And so if that works, then it should allow me to download our little starter module. Okay, so you can see it downloaded some dependencies. It downloaded the keyauth module, JSON APIs, and some of those dependencies. We've got the Gatsby module. This is our latest version in our little starter feature. So that is it for that. If we did this right, then the next steps will work. Now I didn't include the DDev stuff. So I'm going to fire up DDev. DDev is really handy. Do DDev config, DDev start. But of course you can use Lambda or anything that you want. Okay, that's set up. So I didn't include the DDev pieces here, but I'm going to prefix the DDev executable. So this is going to install our Umami theme. I have seen that it'll generate a couple of errors related to like translations, but I wouldn't worry about those if you see some errors. So just looking ahead here, let's do that. So we're going to test the installation here in a second. And then if that looks good, we're going to enable our starter module, and it's going to do several things for us. It saves some of those manual steps. So again, I wouldn't worry about these errors. It's still fine. We'll go ahead and pull up the site just so you can see what it looks like. You might have not seen this before. Okay, so this is our demo Umami site. You can see it's, like I said, it's like a fake restaurant site. And this is the section that we're kind of recreating a little bit. We're just going to fetch some of this article content and images in our Gatsby application. So that looks good. That over there. Let's see. Okay. All right, let's try to enable our starter feature here. Okay, so you can see it's enabled some of our dependencies. Okay, it's looking good. Now I want to show you what it did, just so it's not some sort of magic happening. I want you to see what it did here. So the first thing that we're going to do is go to the Gatsby configuration page. And we're going to circle back to this area. We don't need the URLs right now. This is how Drupal is going to communicate with the Gatsby server, but we don't have to worry about that right this second. So we're really only going to cover the basics that we need for this tutorial. So the first thing that we need that's typical is that we're only going to want to trigger builds for published edits. That makes sense. And this area can be a little bit confusing. So, and Kyle can correct me if any of this is wrong, but I'm pretty sure that's right, is that this area is important for the ink builds and any ink preview. So what happens is every time you save a piece of content in Drupal, so any type of entity, if the checkbox is checked, it's going to save some of that content as JSON data so that preview or ink builds can fetch it. So if you don't save it, then it's not going to be able to send it to Gatsby. And so that might, it could create an error, some kind of problem where you're not seeing your change. When you have a fresh build, it's not fetching from the Gatsby module, it's fetching from JSON API, as we mentioned earlier. This is just for the ink builds piece in preview. And so these are some good defaults. If you have paragraphs, if you use custom blocks, inline blocks, then you'll check these other. I think generally speaking, it's good to probably have too many of these checks than too few. But so anyways, and then the last thing that's a good default is most websites are going to only want to log the entities for your published content. This probably could be worded better, but you're going to usually want this, is that your build site is going to usually only have, published edits. So our little module did that for us. Next thing is it did some permissions configuration. So we're going to have our normal build site just fetch content as an anonymous user, but we're going to have our preview user use the API role. So we've got this little API role over here. It just adds a few permissions. So because we want preview to have access to all the logs, and so preview will have access to the build logs, preview logs, and then our builds user, which is just anonymous, they're going to have access to just the build logs. And then let's see, up here, so our API user can view unpublished content and draft edits and things like that. So our starter module went ahead and created this little API user, assigned them the API role, and then using the keyauth module, we generated this API key, and that's going to be used in our Gatsby application to authenticate so that preview can get those unpublished edits. Hopefully that makes sense. And okay, last thing that I wanted to show you what it did. It's done here. So it set this little checkbox as default. This is usually good. It makes the querying on a fresh build, I think, more efficient. Kyle, do you want to explain kind of what this is doing, the count?
Yeah, I mean, basically it's like, you think of it as like, say you have, 1,000 articles. By default, if you don't include the count, we just have to include them sequentially, because how the JSON API works is you fetch a stretch of articles, and they'll give you a next link, and you go do. And that's kind of slow because you have to go one by one. But if we have the count, we just be like, oh, okay, actually we have 1,000 articles. Let's just fetch these different chunks at the same time in parallel. And that was when we implemented that, it was a 4 or 5x speed up for fetching data. So it was a big win. So you definitely should add that, especially if you're a large site. If you have a small site, who cares? It's going to be fast regardless. But if you have thousands of entities, you're definitely going to need that.
Awesome. Now, one thing that we didn't configure, but that is kind of recommended, is with the JSON API extras module, you can turn off endpoints that you're not using, because Gatsby will try to fetch all the data, but sometimes, it doesn't need all this data. So You can turn off some endpoints if you want to, but for our demo, we're just going to leave everything on. It's fine. Okay, so last thing is we are going to need this API key here in a minute. So I'll just leave this page here. But we're pretty much set up to do our first build. So let's go over to our Gatsby demo starter. I think I've got this pulled up here. So you can fork this or clone it. Let's do that right here. Clone. Gonna remember to CD this time. So I'm going to use Yarn. One thing that I learned sort of the hard way is if your repo has like a package lock and a Yarn lock, it'll confuse Gatsby Cloud because it doesn't know which one to use. So delete it if you're not using Yarn. So I'm going to skip ahead for a minute. So we're going to need to create this little file. So these are your environment variables that your local Gatsby develop is going to read from. You can probably go ahead and start creating this. So I'm just going to copy this. And we're going to need the Drupal URL. One caveat is I have issues with HTTPS locally because it's not a valid SSL cert, and the Gatsby build doesn't like that. So I use HTTP, and then I have to use an environment variable that will tell it to ignore the errors or whatever. So I'll show you that here in a second. So that installed, so that's good. And then we need this API key. And this enable Gatsby refresh endpoint thing, it will enable a refresh endpoint that we need Drupal to ping when it wants preview to update, basically. So if you don't have this set, and Kyle, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but if you don't have this set, then that endpoint won't be turned on and you won't see your preview updates. So this is that environment variable that'll keep it from complaining about the SSL thing. So with that, let's see if it works. So remember, this is our first build, and so it is hitting the JSON API endpoint, which might be aware of. Let's pull it up. Make sure we don't have any errors. Okay, still doing things. It's actually probably going to be slow because it's hitting it. Oh no, we got an error. What did I mess up?
Not sharp. Are you using npm to install?
Hold on.
You
I
type
used Yarn.
Yeah. Try just running Yarn again.
Get Kyle here to help troubleshoot. Let's try it again. Okay, so you can see it's trying to fetch all the content from, if it's running the first time, you're going to see you're going to see this fetch all message, which is expected. But if we ran it again, it's going to say fetching incremental updates or something like that. Just be aware. So this time we don't have errors, so that's nice. But yeah, what I was wanting to show you is like, so this is our JSON. It's not formatted, but so this is the main JSON API endpoint that Drupal exposes. And then so Gatsby is going to hit various endpoints, fetching this content and then storing it. Awesome. So what I like to do when I have when I'm running a build like this is I like to check this first. So we have the little graphic tool. If you don't see a bunch of these tables, you know, on the left side, then you probably have a problem, even if you didn't see an error in the console output. So you want to see these kind of tables, right? Because it's like, oh, okay, article and page and stuff like that. So it looks like it works. Awesome, we got it working. So you can see we've got articles, we pulled their images and tags and things like that. It's a very simple site. We're not trying to recreate the Umami site or anything. We're just trying to prove that Gatsby is able to fetch content from Drupal. So it looks awesome. And yeah, so I mean, we've gone a long way so far. I'm gonna have to keep us moving because we got, I think, about 10 minutes, but this shouldn't take too long. So we got it working, but we've got to configure preview, because right now, if you make content updates in Drupal, nothing's going to happen on the Gatsby side. It doesn't know when to update. So we need to have the Gatsby module ping our preview server and tell it to update. So these, since we're all kind of running the same thing, these will probably be the same on your instance. I guess Kyle can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think these values locally, if you're running npm run develop, are probably going to be the same. So this is our refresh endpoint. This is this domain is like accessible from Drupal. And then we need, so one caveat with this, we probably could have labeled this better, but this is usually going to be the server URL of your preview server, not necessarily your build server, because we use this URL in the Gatsby preview button. We don't need to worry about this right now, and everything else is going to be the same. So we got that, and now we need to configure article content type, because that's our only content that's interacting with Gatsby. And so we're going to turn on Gatsby preview and then turn on our little autosave feature. So we don't care about the core preview right now. Enable our preview button is our little autosave feature. And so that's all good. Let's test this out, see if it's working. I'm gonna just make a simple edit. Go down here. Let's check draft. And then here's our nice little purple open preview button. And if it works, you can see it's auto saving it. And it should pop up here in a second if we did it right. Let me see. You'll also see the console output if it's working. Let me try to reload. Didn't seem like it worked that time. Let's try again. Make sure I did everything right. Oh, yeah, I don't know, Kyle, why I didn't catch the first time. It worked that second time. So you should see.
It missed what, say?
It missed that first draft, but anyways, it worked the second time. So you can see works pretty fast. All right, so we got that working. And so, yeah, it's cool. We got Drupal installed, we got our Gatsby application working, and we've got previews. So we're doing great. And then now I want to show you the Gatsby Cloud setup. see if I stayed logged in. So I did this earlier. We'll jump back to this one probably because it might be a little bit more warmed up, but I want to show you how to add a site here. So you are going to need to have a repo that Gatsby has access to. So I've already got it, I already have access to my little workshop thing over here. Let's look at our instructions. So we're going to connect it to the repo, and we've got a couple of variables to set. We're over here. Okay, so that looks good. We don't need the JSON API key for builds. We do need it for preview. I've already went ahead and deployed the site to Pantheon earlier. Everything is the same. The only thing we need to change are these values over here. So, right, that looks okay. This will be the same. And we need a JSON API key. This one has a different database, so it has a different key. And back here, that looks good. So the first time it builds, it takes a minute. It's been taking like a minute and a half, so I don't want to wait that long. So I do have the same thing I built earlier. So we'll use that in our example. So you will need to go over to site settings and find our webhooks. Preview is the first one. Build hook. Content sync. Kyle, do you want to explain a little bit what content sync does?
Yeah, sure. So this is one of those things that you move from like a kind of the monolith CMS to a decoupled approach, that you kind of realize things that the CMS did for you all these years. And then when you left, okay, now I'm getting a little dramatic. But anyways, it's like you move away from like sort of the full CMS. It's like things don't work, and you don't know it's expecting it to. So one of them is, it's just funny to say it out loud because you're like, well, that works. I mean, that's a thing. But it's like when you click preview, you're like editing content, and you click preview. Like, how do you know where to go on your front ends? Like, what page is actually associated with that? And so when you're when kind of fully within Drupal, it's sort of Drupal just sort of handles that. It has like conventions for like, okay, this is the page, the main page is associated or something. But for making that connection between Gatsby and sort of any arbitrary backend, we created a sort of a technology called content sync, which both has a way for you as the author to kind of like specifically specify what is the link between which content and which pages, and we also can like infer a bunch of stuff around that. So it's like if there's only one page that like queries a particular entity from Drupal, then we're like, okay, those two are connected. But anyways, and then it also is what sort of like syncs you from Drupal to Gatsby Cloud and gets you onto the right page.
Yep. All right, so first draft didn't take this time. Let's try again. I think I've got everything turned on. I got draft. I'm gonna try to save it again. So what I'm showing you is you can, with Gatsby Cloud, you can check your little Gatsby. So it's triggered, so that's good. And so it'll build the preview. So let's see if it's working. So I haven't done an edit on this, so it might need to warm up a little bit since I haven't edited this since like yesterday. Got that. So it didn't trigger a build on purpose because we have that checkbox where it'll only trigger a build when there's a published edit. Since I'm doing a draft edit, it's only triggering a preview. And so in the Gatsby Cloud interface, you can see kind of what's going on. So you can look at logs. Yeah, it's having to like warm up some. So it's having to do that kind of npm stuff. Doing that. So it should be faster. I'll do a couple saves, but it should be faster the subsequent. So now lots of things are happening. Okay, so that's happening. Let's see how long this first build took. Okay, so it should be faster after that. See if that thing worked. Let's try. Okay, cool. So what draft are we on? Are we on draft 2 or 3? We got draft 3. See if it's got that yet. So okay, now it's got it. Okay, cool. So we see that, and then our normal build site should be the same. So let's look at that. Give it a go. Okay, so you don't see the draft title. So that's expected. Now let's make it publish change. I'm going to say published. I think we're actually doing good. If I can finish this in 1 minute, then Paul will be happy. Okay, let's go ahead and save. If we save, it should update both. Let's see. So that's good. And then, so now it's getting, now that we're like warmed up, it's getting faster. So let's see. So we got our little notification, got changes. That's awesome. So that's our preview site. So since it's a published change, we want it on preview and builds. And so builds hopefully will also have that change. I don't think it's got it yet. Maybe builds has to warm up. See, it's saying it's got it. Or wait, let's see. Okay, so this one's taking a, so this is having the same sort of a warm up thing that the preview had. So since this is like a demo site that's nobody's working on, it sort of needs to boot up a little bit. Let's see our logs. Okay, so now stuff is happening. Okay, let's check that out. Okay, so I think it's going to work here in a second. Let's see if it got it. Bam. Okay, well, there you go. I think we did it. It's 10:51 my time. So I think we're good. Let's see. Okay. Yeah, so we went in, configured, just added those settings from Cloud, did some tests, and got our builds and preview working. So, not too bad for, 30 minutes of work here. And so I think we can hop back over to, so we're going to need to do questions here in a second. Just a couple common issues real quick, and then I'll hand it back to Paul. But, a common problem is if Gatsby can't fetch the Drupal data, so you want to make sure you're not running into errors like the SSL thing I mentioned, or just pointing to the wrong place, or it's not grabbing the environment variable correctly, things like that. A lot of times when that happens, it'll also spit out a lot of GraphQL errors, but you want to find that first error in the console output and pay attention to that and see what's happening. Because a lot of times it for whatever reason, maybe you have some HT access turned on or something. So you'll need to troubleshoot that. And then GraphQL, you can have some issues with if you have a mismatch between like your Drupal structure and the Gatsby application. If you renamed a field or something like that, it can generate a GraphQL error that you should be able to narrow down your search by looking at the error in the console output. Another common issue is since Gatsby is like building the schema on the fly, if you have an empty field and it doesn't fetch it from JSON API, then it's not aware of that field. And so that can generate a GraphQL error. but the easy way to mitigate that is that there are plugins that allow you to export your schema so that it can read from that schema instead of trying to like build it on the fly. And then the last thing I just wanted to mention real quick is if you're not seeing your updates happening in preview, a lot of times it will be those checkboxes I showed you with the different entity types. Make sure that you're sending the right data. You can also look at your Gatsby fast build logs to check and see if your content updates are in those logs. We're going to be adding some enhancements to the module this year to give you more of ability to kind of quickly pull up those logs and look at them in detail to like look for your little content changes to make sure you're sending the right data to your like preview or whatever. So those are just some common issues to be aware of. And then these are the links I mentioned earlier. You got your project page, source plugin, that composer template, and then our little workshop demo starter. And then, you know, Kyle and I are on Twitter, but we're also on the Gatsby channel in Drupal Slack. So we hang out there a lot, have discussions. So if you're having like technical issues, that's like a good place to find Gatsby people and Drupal people and all that good stuff. All right. Awesome. How do we do, Paul?
That was fantastic. You had me on the edge of my seat, and excellent work on the timing as well. I was just watching it tick down. I want to make sure that everyone gets finished up within the hour. But yeah, thank you. Thanks for that. Kyle, I know you've been answering some of the questions in the Q&A. Were there any that you wanted to maybe dive a little deeper on or answer a little bit more publicly? We've got a couple of minutes to go through a couple of them.
Yeah, there's a lot of questions about how to like lock down your Drupal instance. That's one of the advantages of doing decoupled is that you can just like hide Drupal away from anyone who might want to hurt it. You know, keep it fresh as locked away in the cloud. Anyways, so you can set up. Anyways, one approach that we recommend is with Gatsby Cloud we have like static IP, so you can like set up a VPN and then Gatsby Cloud you get a static IP. You talk to our sales team about doing this, and then you can only allow in the Gatsby Cloud IP for doing requests, and so that can like be a very secure way to set things up. Another question was about, you know, how long does it take to build a site with the sort of this approach versus sort of traditional Drupal approach? Jake actually answered this, like he's actually done that. You know, he's built Drupal Gatsby sites, but I would say in general it's like similar. If anything, maybe faster. One thing that a lot of people report is that like with Drupal, you're sort of like often blocked, like the front end could be blocked by backend work or vice versa. And what's nice about decoupling is that you can work on like the Gatsby React side of thing independent of Drupal work. You can actually like build all the components even before there's a Drupal backend, and then only later kind of like wire them up. And so there's a lot more flexibility around kind of like how you structure the plans. What would you say, Jay? Is that?
Yeah, I think I know it is handy because there's a clear separation, which is nice. So it's like, okay, Drupal teams doing things, content modeling, things like that. Gatsby team focused on components and things like that. You can build it like statically and then rewire it later, but it's better to have some coordination with the backend team because you might organize components and things differently if once you know kind of what the content structure looks like in Drupal. And so if you want to avoid a lot of rework, still think it's good to coordinate with the backend team so that you know you're not having to do a lot of refactoring because you built it like statically. You're like, oh, I'll just use like, you know, so markdown files.
Decouple but stay friends. That's kind of what you're
saying. Yeah, I still think you'll be much further ahead if you communicate, because you could still build it that way, but if you're talking to the backend team that's doing the content modeling, you'll get some insight into how they're chunking up the content and organizing it so that you don't waste time or anything.
Yeah. But the nice thing is like you can like decide as a team like, okay, this is our content model, and then the front end can then immediately take that and start, like, just with like mocked up data, you can start, building out components and stuff. Another question, Jeff was saying that one of the big advantages of, static site generators is security. And he's asking, like, does this reactive approach that I was talking about, like change anything about that? And so I just to clarify, like, when I say reactive, it's like that's always been part of Gatsby. So it's sort of this reactive is the idea of like automatically updating some output in real time. But the secure part of Gatsby stays the same, whether it's static or reactive, because how Gatsby works is like we sync data out of Drupal or whatever your backend is into the Gatsby DB, and then use that to kind of do the build. So no web visitor ever talks directly to the backend. It's sort of mediated through Gatsby. And so the reactive part is just like, how do we take everything we love about, like, static site generators, like the security, the speed, the simplicity of like hosting and running the site, and just speed everything up, because they're just not fast enough for a lot of sites. But if we can make them fast enough, then then it's wonderful. You kind of get like the simplicity and hosting simplicity, like just sort of the sheer simplicity and speed of the static site generator from like kind of like the website's perspective. And then the reactive part in Gatsby Cloud is just to speed everything up around like build times.
Great stuff. Thanks, Kyle. We better wrap it up here because we're coming up to the hour now. I know there's just one small bit of news. You will be speaking at Decoupled Days next week, right, in New York?
Yeah.
So,
It also Shane from our team, which some of you might know. Yeah, so there'll be a bit of Gatsby presence there. So
great.
I hope to see some of you.
Nice one. And then just a final bit of housekeeping for me is a reminder again that today's webinar will be captioned, and you should receive an email next week with the link where you can watch this back with captions. So that's it. I think we're just about done. Thank you, Kyle. Thanks everyone for joining, and thank you, Jay. You did an excellent job, like I said, on the edge of my seat, but I'm glad we got there in the end. And for all other updates, give us a follow on Twitter. It's at GatsbyJS. So we'll leave it there, I think. Thanks everyone. See you soon.
Thank you. Bye-bye.